10 on de-risk business adoption of AI. In this weekly podcast, I explored the premise of can trustworthy AI be instrumental in helping businesses or organizations gain a competitive edge, and promote business outcomes that are intended and aligned with business objectives, including accelerated innovation with AI and in a responsible fashion. In this episode, I am really excited to welcome my guest, Dr. Irina Mirkina.
Pamela, thank you for having me. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. A brief introduction on Dr. Mirkina. She is an AI strategist and a leading expert on responsible AI, working for increasing global awareness of both risks and benefits of artificial intelligence. Dr. Mirkina is currently the AI lead for the Office of Innovation at the United Nations Children's Fund at UNICEF. Um, what I wanted to kind of ask you to, did I cover everything,
Yeah,
Dr. Mirkina? Is
yes,
there anything you wanted
yes.
to add?
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about a little bit on where we are with the business adoption of AI. And what is currently has become the focal point in the artificial intelligence world has been generative AI.
Mhm.
What is your opinion on is that going to be the next focus? Is that a disruptor? In other words, in AI, is that the only thing we should be focusing on in the business world?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. Um, there are several parts to this, right? On the one hand, generative AI has captured everybody's imagination because suddenly people without special technical education, without specific digital skills, are able to create content, generate text, generate images. And it kind of really highlights how much of our work consists of office work, at least consists of very routine tasks like automated replies or replies that could be automated, like in your
Mhm.
emails. On the other hand, I do feel that there is a lot of hype around generative AI because it sounds like a human speaking back to you, even though it's just a predictive model, just like the autocorrect on your phone that we've had for years.
Mhm.
So that hype is very understandable, but kind of led us to forget a little bit about some very exciting and truly disruptive applications for AI in finance and health and education. Across the board, AI has been an integral part of many business processes and many development processes. So for me, what I'm waiting for is probably for another few months, maybe until the end of next year, until the end of 2024, when a lot of generative models that are currently still being piloted or exist as standalone chatbots, they become more integrated into our office programs, they become more ubiquitous, and then
Mhm.
everybody will see their limitations and also how often they generate misinformation or hallucinate. And then that hype will die down a little bit, and we will see them for what they are, useful tools like calculators. We don't get super excited about calculators, but yes, calculators kind of enable us to do our work a little bit faster. And then we can focus on the potential of AI, different types of AI models, to be truly, truly transformational, both in business and in the development sector.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. So what I'm hearing is to wait and see because it is certainly a big force, but it's not at the point that it is going to be disrupting the trajectory that we are seeing with narrow AI or predictive AI, which is where the most uh, use cases and value has been
Yeah.
so far?
Well, the ILO, the International Labour Organization, has recently, in September, I think, has published a report on the predicted effects of generative AI, and they have created that report with generative AI, like using it in their statistical analysis, which was very interesting use case. Their predictions are that about 2% of jobs globally might be replaced by AI, by generative AI at some point in the future. That's not tomorrow. And quite a more significant percentage, around 15 to 17% of jobs, will be significantly augmented by AI. Those effects are very different across high income and low income countries, and they're very gendered. But generally, a lot of routine jobs will be or might be simplified to the point where AI will substitute a huge parts of them, which means those jobs will have to be changed or retrained. What that means for us is probably the disruption will happen partly because of generative AI, but that disruption will be more in terms of all of us having to learn new skills and probably change how we do our jobs thanks to the technology, kind of how we do all of our math right now with calculators or with any of your spreadsheet program of choice, and not on paper or in your head.
Okay, so one takeaway I have from that for the audience is that it is coming down the pike, and businesses, one way to for business to adopt that and prepare for that is to get a get a roadmap, created or prepare one on which aspects of their job functions, processes can be lends itself to generative AI, and prepare the workforce for that, right? As opposed to having it be unprepared, basically.
Yes. Again, from the human rights perspective, it's very important that we don't just announce, oh, okay, all of our workers are going to be replaced by ChatGPT
Right.
and let it at that. If it involves reskilling, if it involves a human approach to our business and to responsible AI, where we trust that humans have expertise and the knowledge, conceptual knowledge and conceptual ability to produce new things that AI simply does not have and will not have for the foreseeable future, then we can shift into a truly sustainable future, rather than we will replace our workers and then discover that AI is simply not good for most of the tasks.
Right, which is a good segue into the next point I wanted to kind of talk to you about, which is, so we have been using and have adopted AI at the business level, at the at multiple levels, and even society, and kind of have an idea of mechanics required, right? We know what are the mechanics required for ensuring success for AI, such as whether when it comes to ensuring data quality, optimizing the models, moving from pilots to scale up, making a business case, finding that perfect RO, perfect use case,
Mhm.
measuring ROI, etc. But the question is, what about cultural change management? What do you feel? What do you feel are the elements of responsible AI
Mhm.
and um, cultural changes
Mhm.
required to ensure that organizations can succeed and excel with AI?
That is a fascinating question. It is very complex, so I think I'll go like touching upon several elements here. One is, of course, a shift in mindset, right? For many, many years, people working on AI development usually came from the software development world, or came from academia through research. This shift is now happening where we suddenly realize that it's not just another piece of technology. It can have a broader consequences on the world around us. So the outcomes, the recommendations, that predictions create changes across the society, create shifts in how customers or which products the customers choose, create shifts in how information is disseminated, amplify the digital divide across the world, which means closing opportunities for some people and distributing the value from AI systems very unequally across the world. So, being a lot more aware of the fact that responsible AI development and responsible AI use is no longer an option or a nice to have perk, that cultural or mindset change is definitely something that needs to happen. Responsible
Mm.
AI needs to become an integral, normalized part of the way we do things. And that involves checking that the AI is responsible throughout the life cycle. You have mentioned the data quality, but what does that mean? Just the integrity of how we collected the data, or also thinking about the who did we collect the data from? Who has
Yeah.
labeled the data? Did we pay them well? Like I can mention several examples that came from very well established companies, but using the labor from effectively digital sweatshops, which
Mhm.
is paying them nothing for the hard labor, for the hard work that they do. That integrity, if the company does not want to tarnish their reputation, if the company wants to be sure that the quality of the data is good, but then the quality of the models is good as well, that would mean looking very closely at who is developing AI models, right? So there needs to be another shift happening in terms of diversity and inclusion on AI teams. And then there is a legal aspects coming in, particularly with generative AI. Copyright issues are so complicated, but also everything about consent that goes into collecting the data that most of the foundation models are built on. Those issues are still unresolved. The, the category of people who will have most of the jobs or most difficult jobs for the next 10, 15 years will be the legal lawyers, oh, sorry, the AI lawyers. So, how the company decides where they stand on each of those issues will determine whether or not they can look in the mirror basically and say, yes, I'm doing responsible AI, I'm not harming the world. A lot of the times, it's just a social responsibility stance, right? We want to do good for the world with our products. Therefore, we also want to develop those products ethically and responsibly. And I think that cultural shift that is happening is definitely something that underlies how the technology will be developed eventually, and also whether or not we respect the human rights when we develop those models and when we use them.
Yes, that it really is a very complex problem to solve for. In other words, how do you create that conscience for globally for the society for business,
Mhm,
right? How do you make sure that yes, this is the right thing to do, but uh, as we know, most mostly any enterprise is set up for making a profit
mhm,
and being scaling up and driven by profits, right?
mhm,
So if that comes in the way, that's going to be a very it's a tough problem to solve because I've been in the corporate world for the last 25 years, and
mhm,
it's not a easy conversation sometimes to have.
Yeah.
So it really is a kind of a change in mindset
Hmm.
that will have to be some of it will be organic and some will be driven through, as you said, lawyers are going to have a very
Yeah.
um, you know very they have a complex task. We all do have a
Hmm.
complex task ahead of us. um, so let's just go to
Can I comment on
of
that as
course.
well? I think what business hopefully can realize is that there is no contradiction between being a successful enterprise and building responsible algorithms. Quite the opposite. So, for example, let's take facial recognition algorithms that have been in the spotlight in the past few years quite frequently for being more accurate on white faces and less accurate for dark skinned users, which created lots of problems in lots of sectors, right? From universities and to justice system and so on. What the organizations need to recognize is that if your algorithm is more accurate and can serve more users, you are actually have a better business, right? You're able to actually serve your customers, reach everybody, and not just a select category of people who were in your initial, like, very, very limited and unrepresentative data set. So building responsible AI is a huge contribution, a very positive contribution to the business. There is no contradiction with, okay, we will have to compromise that if the profits come into place. And I see that a lot at the conferences that I attend. So all the tech industry, but more and more also all the business executives come around to the fact that, oh, actually there are specific guardrails that we can implement, and there are specific processes and mechanisms that we can implement, and then our business will be a ethical and responsible, but b also successful.
I agree. And that really is the essence of this podcast and my premise that trustworthy AI, what you're calling responsible, I call trustworthy, because there's the elements of I had defined 8 essential pillars of trustworthy AI.
Mm,
4 years ago, long before we started taking a look at it, the NIST framework came out, etc. But I do feel, because as I mentioned, I come from the corporate world, looking at what can be a showstopper, what can make a business not want to adopt, um, certain guardrails. So started taking a look at how to anticipate that,
mm,
and that is the whole premise of this podcast, which is how do you de-risk,
mhm.
right, the adoption of AI?
Yeah.
Because the more it is put in the terms and in the framework and language that the business world understands, for example, or organizations that are looking to create initiatives
Mhm.
and achieve intended outcomes, is that what can be a showstopper if you don't have it? And you are that is a brilliant example, because if you are going by just taking a siloed approach
Mhm.
where the development team is taking the data that they have, they produce an output. Yes, it's doing what the model or the system is supposed to do. It's doing facial recognition, but there are these elements of fairness and transparency of how you're doing what you're doing, the
Mhm.
explainability, right? These are the essential, one of these, some of the essential trusted pillars.
Yeah.
And if you take it right at the outset and create that governance approach, and they have the right teams involved, to your point earlier, other teams in the business as opposed to the developers of the system, that's where the magic needs to
Yeah.
happen, right? It's
Yeah.
at the beginning, it's at how, when these projects are being laid
Yeah.
out.
The
So thank you
stakeholders.
so much, that's a great point.
Yeah.
And last but not least, right? You have covered it, and but I just want to kind of end on this note, which is if you could highlight what can be the most strategic way of adopting AI ethics, and how as it relates to reducing business risk adoption of AI.
Hmm. Well, the most strategic way, um, the most strategic way, I think, comes from, of course, building awareness among the senior management, right? So there needs to be a buy-in from the senior management and the awareness of not only the potential opportunities and the benefits of AI, but also the risks that come with it. And the risk for me, and I think, again, to your point about cultural change, which may be not only about the cultural change within our organizations, but also cultural change that we all need within the society, is there is a lot of talk about risks, but I'm in the business of risk management, not risk fear mongering, right? Risk management is not the same as fear mongering.
Right.
Existential risks, something that is going to happen when the machines rebel and going to kill us, that is not relevant. At this point, what we need is risk management embedded in the together with the business strategy, right? So the
Right.
strategic approach is to, first of all, look at it from the perspective of where your organization needs to make an impact. If it's an impact in financial terms, if it's an impact in social terms, like UNICEF, for example, is doing a lot of work in the development sector, and for us, impact is not measured in dollars; it's measured in the lives of children that we can save or improve. But ultimately, it's the same. Your organization has a purpose. How can AI serve that purpose? Choosing those strategic directors as in relevance for what your organization is doing is the first step. Then evaluating how you're going to evaluate that impact is another step. Making sure that you're building responsible AI principles and responsible AI guardrails from the beginning, not as an afterthought, not as we are going to develop it first and then evaluate how it's doing, but looking at how can you make sure that your data are representative from the beginning, all of your procurement processes are inclusive, you're not increasing the digital divide, and ideally you're reducing the digital divide. And in many cases that means partnerships with academia, with responsible AI companies that provide frameworks and ethical principles and the systems that implement those principles for monitoring AI systems. Partnerships with UN agencies such as UNICEF that have been leading this work by example for many years and have a lot of like developed practices for how this practically works. And then literally trying to look into building responsible systems by design rather than as an afterthought. I think that's an important point. So for me, the strategic direction comes from where do you make them, where does AI can help you make the biggest impact, but then how do you implement responsible by design into all of your processes. Yes.
Yeah, that's amazing, and I think we're so aligned. So this is fantastic.
It's easy
uh,
to agree on some things. Yes.
Yes. So I think we've covered a lot, at least three salient points, which I think are very important. And I'll sum them up in the notes for the show as well. But I really enjoyed the conversation, Irina.
Likewise.
I've got to do this again.
Of course.
Yes. Anything that you want to say at the conclusion? or you think you've covered it all?
I think we've covered quite a lot. One thing that I would like to highlight is the role of quite a lot of AI governance and responsible frameworks that exist in the moment are a little separate. So each country is doing their own thing, and when companies that maybe work internationally or not even like work locally but don't realize that they're using algorithms or data from other countries, don't realize that different legal frameworks might have applied. So you think that you are doing everything legally and responsibly, but what is truly inside your algorithms, that could be another story. So there is a lot of conversations and discussions going on at the moment around international governance of AI. And I like to compare this to the developments that we saw in the beginning of the 20th century when the first cars appeared as the disruptive technology, and everybody probably was excited but also skeptical because the horses are better. um, but what we ended up with needing, like truly needing, was the convention on road signs, right, and the convention on traffic regulations. And it took a few years and it took some negotiations and different versions of it. But what we that is the direction where we're heading into right now in terms of responsible AI development, where it's becoming more and more clear that just national regulations may not be enough because the data flows and the AI flows across the whole world, and the impacts may be felt across the value chain, particularly for the multinational companies. Um, so the international regulations right now probably will end up in the situation of, you know, cars are very exciting, but we need to know where is the stop sign and where is the pedestrian ahead. And we have ethical principles already. We have NIST risk management framework. We have the executive order in the US and the EU AI Act coming through slowly, but we are getting there. But how it looks for the whole world will be a long process, but also hopefully when the results of that process will also help the businesses to guide their organizations in doing AI and using AI, procuring AI in a more responsible way.
Thank you. I agree with that. I think EU AI Act has a different focus. It's a risk based as opposed to the executive order
Yeah,
that and the NIST risk based AI RMF is of course not is voluntary, but I do hope we do harmonize to your point on internationally on an approach which makes sense for the free sovereign world, right? The democratic world, as opposed to at least on one side of the democratic
yeah,
world, we can harmonize on those regulations. So
yeah.
I do agree. Thank you, Irina. Dr. Merkina, this was an excellent conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Pamela. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you.